spring in the MDRS experience as a member of Crew 139B. And today I would like to discuss my research project. Titled Team Building, Cohesion, and the Maintenance of Simulation, my project sought to identify and compare the impact that two different types of team building activities would have on a crew's reported cohesion levels, as well as their ability to maintain simulation. Now, today's presentation has been divided into three main points: the objective, method, and results and discussion portion. But before we get into that, just kind of pose the question out: why team building in the first place, and maybe even specifically why team building for Mars or MDRS environment? Essentially, team building wants to, as an end result, create more productive performances, or in other words, more productive teamwork. And as this unknown author writes, teamwork, simply stated, is less me and more we. Research also agrees in general that team building is at the heart of exploration and growth for many organized groups. And this, of course, covers business models, sports teams, military efforts, and of course, space exploration. As a business professional, Randall Carlock stated in 2012 that the complexity of organizations and the dynamic nature of the environment means that teams are becoming an increasingly important organizational structure. Now, moving one step past the general idea that teams are important, Margaret McCabe states in a personal reflection that it is a relationship between the team that turns a group of people into a successful organization. Now, when comparing these two quotes, we see the progression in thought from generally acknowledging the importance of teamwork to going behind the scenes of what actually makes up a team. And going just a little bit further into past research, now to kind of talk about specific team building techniques, researchers in South Africa wanted to explore, and did, the factors, the variables that went into obtaining a successful perception of team building exercises. Now, I have to note that they weren't measuring concrete data down the line if this affected performance, but merely the simple perception of a successful team building activity. And here are a few of the findings that relate directly to this project. Where the event took place, researchers found that participants who took place in activities that were both outside and inside reported higher perceptions of success rather than participants who took part in a team building activity that solely was conducted indoors. Number two, who administered the exercises also made a difference. Bringing in an outside facilitator, someone that the employees were unfamiliar with, created a higher perception of success than those who brought in someone from the company that each participant perhaps knew. And then lastly, the types of outdoor activities actually was a rejected hypothesis. It turns out that getting outside is able to create a perception of success, and it doesn't matter directly what you do outside, suggesting that outside in and of itself is a factor in creating positive perceptions. And this will tie directly into the results later. But as mentioned earlier, business articles are not the only place, business environments are not the only place that team building benefits. Also, these sources did not measure concrete outcomes either, and that's where these next two sources come in. First up, James Griffith, while doing military research, observed the link between the perception of success with team building and the actual meaningful performance, and that link was cohesion. Team building was not, according to him, not the end-all be-all to higher performance. That in fact, team building only serves to enhance cohesion. That something happens, a connection is made before groups and teams are able to become successful and perform at their highest level. So, according to the IAA study group on psychology and culture during long-duration space missions, they also agree with Griffith and the other business sources, at least on the surface level, that team building is important. But they also acknowledge that the group cohesion, that team building only serves to enhance the group cohesion in order to impact performance. However, what was different about this study is that because space exploration is such an abnormal environment, they suggest, contrary to the researchers in South Africa, that the team building activity was actually, it needs to be more strenuous. It needs to be replicable to the stressors of Mars. Now, going to Mars and MDRS is obviously a little bit different. However, they are both abnormal environments. It's different. It adds stress. There's an adjustment period of the time and the isolation associated with being in the hab. And there's stipulations to your daily activity. At EMDRS, also, there's no adjustment to space. There's no worries of radiation. The extreme isolation of being in space, being away from humanity. Also, our literal survival isn't necessarily dependent on one another as a crew. It's more dependent on the airplane and the pilot getting to Utah and back. However, the overall experience and the effectiveness of the trip is dependent on each other. Our ability to work through problems and to kind of adapt to that stressful environment together. So, kind of brings us to the point of answering why team building and more specifically why team building for Mars and MDRS is because of these strengths found on Mars and how they relate to MDRS. Team building then becomes even more important to create cohesion so that when problems arise, crews are able to minimize, if not completely eliminate them. But now that we've answered that question, let's talk about a little bit how this kind of carried out in this experiment. Now, when I got kind of stumbling along, getting started, I came across this quote: "If you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, go with others." And this, for me, embodied the idea of teamwork and kind of the spirit of going to Mars. So, with this in mind, the objective came about to identify and then separate and isolate the three main factors of team building that I found in previous research. Is that there are different team building techniques that you're trying to create cohesion, and then the overall performance. And this really lent itself to a very simple research question: which team building activity, physical or cognitive, would impact team cohesion the most, and how will that relate to their performance? And specifically for this case, the performance was the ability to maintain simulation. But let's get into the method and jump right into the chart. The first thing you may notice is Group A and Group B. McLennan Community College has sent, in the recent years, 2 crews for a 6-day rotation, rather than sending 1 crew for a whole 2 weeks. Now this creates the 2 different groups. Each crew was made up of the standard 6 members. Of those members, 4 were full-time students, while 2 were faculty instructors, one in which had already participated in the MDRS experience the previous year and were now acting as commanders. The rest is rather self-explanatory. Group A, Crew 139A, was participated in the cognitive team building exercises, while Crew B, the crew I was on, participated in the physical team building exercises. What they did was the same, where we had attended regular class meetings leading up until that point. We also filled out evaluation scales that we'll go over in just a minute. Before the team building exercise, immediately after, and then again at day 5. Also during their simulation, each crew member filled out a sim chart every day. And so this data points were collected on back-to-back weeks for both crew. And the three evaluations used were the Team Cohesion Evaluation Scale, also known as the Tss, the Maintenance of Simulation Log, and the two different team building techniques, physical and cognitive. Up first, the Tss scale was a condensed form scale used in factor analysis of cowork cohesion. Originally, it was a 75 Likert statement scale, but was condensed down to specifically target task-oriented performance statements such as, on a scale of 1 to 10, rate your crew's ability to solve problems or work together. Next, the simulation log was made up, really kind of original in its use, but it was solely based on the simulation rules promoted by the Mars Society. Depressurizing before you leave, gloves, helmet, not opening the hab without your spacesuit on, no improper use of equipment, no cell phones or smoking. MDRs provided the food, and EVAs were carried out according to the requirements, and analysis of the EVA was done back at the hab. This basically had the 10 rules, and how it was designed was set up to promote users to either say that yes, the rule was followed, or no, it wasn't. When a rule was broken, the log directed them to explain the circumstance. And kind of lastly, we'll go over the team building activities, cognitive or physical. And when looking at this picture, you can't tell which crew is which. But maybe if we throw out the names to one, such as the truss fall or the Mars walker or island hopping versus mental set and framing. And if you're still not sure, these set of pictures may explain the difference and how I isolated the two. While Crew A was conducting most of their things inside, Crew B would participate in activities outside. Now, kind of to wrap it all up, what the results in the discussion portion. First, we'll take a look at the evaluation scores from the team cohesion. Before team building, Crew A scored higher, but then after the team building activity, they scored lower. And the opposite is true for Crew B. Now, both crews ended up scoring around the same amount at MDRS. However, of this information, the only statistical significant correlation is from Crew 139A's post-team building, the jump to the MDRS score. What this suggests is that MDRS in general is able to overcome team building exercises in its ability to bring people together almost forcibly. Next, the maintenance of simulation results. This is the day 1 through 6 are the exact amount of violations that occurred every day according to both teams. I note that day 2 of Crew 139A's simulation was discounted due to failure with the hab, and simulation was called off. As you see, both crews had days where they had more simulation violations and others had fewer. Towards the end is where we see most of the violations occurring. However, the average violations per day were really not that far apart, with Crew A having 7 and Crew B only having 5. It was analyzed that this two violation difference would not make a difference actually in performance, though. Now, there are some limitations to this study. It's a very small sample size and limited time together. The semester lasts 4 months, and we periodically attended class throughout there, and also it's only a 6-day rotation. The instruments used for the team cohesion, there's very little research done prior to this on the ability to keep track of cohesion levels. Also, the Tss that was created was not sensitive enough to accomplish the study's goal. And then lastly, the maintenance of simulation log lacked clarity, and more detailed log is needed for future studies. And with that said, the future opportunities are rather optimistic. Further correlation studies of this nature need to be conducted in order to carry out or really solidify any research or results established in this project. Like I mentioned earlier, the simulation log should be improved to add clarity to the various forms of violations that occur while at MDRS. Although there is a narrative of what happens at MDRS, until you're at MDRS yourself as a crew, you're not completely sure where violations can occur. And the log needs to account for those different and more specific areas. The Tss should also be improved to create a more sensitive scale. Rather than a 10-point Likert scale, it needs to be on a 5-point scale with answer choice descriptors. This would make it more sensitive, as well as the answer choice descriptors would give almost a narrative to why each participant was selecting that number versus the other one. And then lastly, including personality traits may serve beneficial to analyzing future results of this nature. Does your personality have anything to do with your ability to create and maintain simulation, or for that matter, cohesion as well? That's the end of my presentation. If you'd like a list of references or even the whole paper, please contact me and I can get you a copy of that. Right now I'd like to open up for questions. Sure. Let me get back to the results here. So kind of what happens, one explanation of the difference between the outcomes after the post-team building and what I didn't say is that this kind of links back to the previous research found by the South African study, is that being outside in and of itself creates a positive perception of success. And perhaps in that result is actually not measuring cohesion, but the perception of we had a better time outside versus inside. And there were also two members of Crew A were not able to show up. One member was not there on time. That may or may not have resulted in a ultimate average of, hey, people didn't show up, relating that to the cohesion evaluation.
Sorry, team A was the one that was absent.
Yes.
Have you tried doing the activities that were physical outside, doing the indoors or the cognitive task doing outside?
I have not. There were brief moments where the cognitive group was outside on the back patio. Obviously, that's not exactly what we would have in mind with your suggestion. But no, I have not tried that.
Within the group, was there a leader or somebody that will be able to proceed the activity if the group didn't work cohesively?
Sure. And correct me if this isn't the answer to your question, but each crew member had a commander with previous experience going to MDRS, and they acted even throughout the class periods as well as the team building activities with that title. They were in charge of how it was run. Yes.
You probably had a comparison or a distribution of introverts versus extroverts. I know this wasn't what your study was meant to look at, but did you see any difference in how, I don't know, did you have more introverts on the inside team or more extroverts? Like, a lot of the stuff that I'm looking at in the picture showed a lot of people touching each other, and that might be really awkward for certain people to go through that. I mean, did you notice any difference in personality? I mean, I know, like I said, that's not what you're looking to study, but did you incidentally notice it? correlation between personality types and reactions to team building exercises?
Yes, I believe crew 139B had a separation almost down the line of 3 and 3 of introverts versus extroverts. But I didn't. There was multiple instances. I'm not sure if I have a picture of the trust fall where it was apparent that some crew members were not as trusting in the fall as others. Some would stand there and rock back and forth, while others would rather have not participated in that activity at all. So I think there probably was a difference. And again, I think that would need to be tracked more in future studies. Yes.
Were there consequences for the violations? In other words, you can't vote with somebody off the island when you're on Mars.
Correct.
What happened to people who do the violations?
No, the most straightforward answer is just generally no. However, crew 139B, being a part of that crew, I think it created this is the guy tracking our simulation violations. And there was jokingly a guilt about when simulations were violated and they had to report it. But no, not directly involved in the study was a consequence.
And I was going to ask you that. How will you handle a situation where one of the crew members goes offline? So you have to remove that person. How will you handle that situation? So that's going to be a big question.
Right. There won't be simulation violations in Mars without consequence. It'll be major consequence, and it'll be very obvious when it happens. Yes, sir.
Did you have any? I noticed on the criteria it included everything from cell phones, to cigarette smoking, to even chewing gum. Did you have a breakdown as to what types of violations were more common? Was it wardrobe? Was it cell phones? Was it what was the most common type of violation?
There was 2 very common types, and it made up most of the violations in and of itself. The 2 were communication through social media. I believe that going in, both crews had decided that communication via email was appropriate. So there was that, and then the last thing was really wanting to do, and this occurred really more towards the end of the rotation, was that people wanted to do things faster in certain moments. So taking a glove off if it made the situation